You can go any desk, yeah, any desk you want to. Yeah. Cool.
Like that's my thing. If I catch myself getting habitual, I'll immediately take a different seat, mix it up.
Cool. All right.
Want to sit down? Sure. Yeah. Go for it. Gotcha.
Good taste in music.
Oh,
Those are all mine. I recommend that.
we've got a lot of your material around today, actually.
So if I could just get a mic check from you, and then
Sure. How much you want me to
perfect.
project or not project?
That's perfect. If that's your normal speaking voice, that's perfect.
Okay, great.
Brett, can I get one from you?
Yeah, definitely. How's that work? Good. Check. One,
Yep.
two.
We'll be good.
Perfect. Now I'll
You're sporting that Burberry tie. You look pretty sharp there.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks.
good.
Appreciate it.
So I'll cut an intro later. We'll just kind of get into it and
Okay.
go. And how long do you have?
10, 12 hours, something like that.
Really? Cool. Perfect.
I do not.
It's a very long time.
I'm flexible. How long did you have in mind?
We didn't have anything in mind, but I wanted to know if you went. I've got 15 minutes, and I would just get to the meat of everything and get you on your way.
Yeah, maybe you want to do like 15, 20, something like that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Okay, cool.
So, you've obviously got a lot of stuff going on, right? You're an author, you're an entrepreneur, venture capitalist, jazz guitarist. But what is it about, because you hear yourself, Seth Godin, Gary Vaynerchuk, all of these guys are talking about this year is the year to do that thing. You know, whatever that thing is that's kind of buried inside of you, all of you are kind of speaking the same language, that if you're ignoring that voice inside of you, if you're not reinventing yourself, that you're really missing out because it feels like there's something happening. What is different between right now and the energy that's right now in 2015 than, let's say, 2014, you know, kind of as we ramped up to where we are now?
Well, I think we're finally out of the penalty box. You know, we had so much trauma around 2008 and the meltdown, and that really signified the end of an era and rang in a new one. And what it really taught us all is that we can no longer do the things the same way and expect the same result. A whole new set of skills were needed in order to be successful in this new age of business and opportunity. And so I feel like we have been apologizing. We've been sort of in the penalty box up until maybe 2013, 14. And now it's a new era. Now we are in the midst of unprecedented opportunity. The cost to start a company has plummeted, the cost of technology has plummeted, and the opportunity has skyrocketed. So I feel that in this era, with this much possibility and change and upheaval, this is the perfect breeding ground for entrepreneurial endeavors. And I hope that people really use this year as an opportunity to springboard and take on their biggest hopes and dreams. The worst thing that you can have is regret. That's like the worst emotion in humanity, because you can't do a thing about the past. So rather than waiting for 30 years saying about all the things you could have, should have done, man, now is the time to do it.
And if somebody's, you know, they've read 800 books, right, and they still haven't quite got the message, what's kind of a thing if I've got that entrepreneurial itch, but I don't really know how to start? What's the way that I kind of get my foot wet and go, okay, now I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to, you know, in the book Road to Reinvention, you guys have a very specific way in which somebody should think about the pitch and the way in which they ask for money. So if I'm not quite at the pitch stage, what's the starting gun, I guess?
You know, the answer is common sense, but not always common practice, as are many things in life, of course. But I would say that start small. I mean, if you make it feel like this overwhelming, bet the farm, monolithic type decision, you're never going to do it. But if you're really passionate about starting a tech company, then don't go quit your job. Like, start it in the evenings, or go, you know, moonlight for another tech company and get experience, or start working with tech entrepreneurs. Or if you want to start a restaurant, same thing. You know, don't, you know, take your entire savings and sell your house and mortgage everything just to start a restaurant. Go get some experience. So I think that what happens is little steps of action that are persistent. That's what creates momentum. Don't worry about taking the one giant leap. Worry about the little teeny incremental steps that you can take, because ultimately you'll start cracking. It's like a hacker. I've been studying about hackers recently. And hackers don't say, I'm going to have one solution to hack into the military. They do thousands and thousands of these little teeny experiments, and they learn and pivot and adapt, and ultimately they crack the code. I think it's a perfect metaphor for all of us. You know, you shouldn't feel like it's this overwhelming, scary thing. Just start hacking, start chipping away at it, and ultimately that will yield to big gains.
Well, I know we're really excited to talk about the future, but if you even rewound time and take us back to like the Josh Linkner of 1999, and do you feel like that's stuff that, did you have a purview to that even when you were starting ePrize, or do you feel like that's something that's one of the most valuable things that you've learned over time?
Yeah, well, so when I started ePrize, I mean, this was I'd had a couple of successes already, so I had already had a little bit of economic gain. I had just sold my previous company. But that was taking on the never been done before. The promotions industry was this good old boy, old school network, and I decided to disrupt it. So that was less of a hack and more of a swing for the fences kind of thing. But the way we got there was hacking. I mean, the first employee that I hired wasn't some tech genius; it was a salesperson. So we just figured, let's go out there, let's get deals, let's drive real momentum, and if we sell it, we'll figure out how to build it. So there was a lot of this raw scrappiness to it. It wasn't like we figured everything out and we had some beautiful operating manual. We just started. There's an old saying: you bite off more than you can chew, and then chew as fast as you can. That's exactly what we did in 1999.
It's good for even day-to-day decision making, really, for anyone is thinking in those terms. You make something, like you said, so big that you can't move on it until it's perfect, and you're not going to get forward.
That's exactly right. I heard a great quote today from the head of the MIT Media Labs. It really resonated with me, so I thought I'd share it. He said, you want to have your job and your career and your company run by a compass, not a map. So dissecting that for a minute, think about a map where there's detailed instructions. Like if you did Google Maps to get from Michigan to California, it would tell you exactly where to turn, and you just follow the directions. The problem is that in life and in business, the world's moving too quickly to do all that. And you don't have all the instructions in front of you. It's quite the opposite. You have to make stuff up as you go. You have to make decisions in the face of ambiguity, and you may have to make real judgment calls without that map in front of you. So instead of the map, if you can really get acquainted using a compass, in other words, it's going to steer you in the right direction. And that compass could be your vision for your company. It could be sort of a moral or ethical compass. But use that to navigate rather than waiting for detailed instructions, because in today's complex world, I don't think you're going to get the instructions that will make you feel comfortable. You've got to get comfortable using that compass.
And you've written a couple really great posts in the last couple weeks, and one that went up, I believe, a day or two ago, where you talked about this 6-month rule that you were in class and you were learning jazz guitar, and the teacher or the doctor, I don't really remember the professor's title, but he said, what you're learning right now, you'll be able to play in 6 months. Can you speak a little bit about kind of what that mindset is like when you're dealing with business, or even with your personal life, running your personal brand on social, what that 6-month time frame looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, if anything, I think it creates comfort for us all in that, we all want something different in our lives. Maybe we want to look better or feel better or make more money or whatever else. And because we live in an instant gratification world, it's very easy for us to get frustrated because the minute you want it, it doesn't appear. But I think that not every example, but the vast majority fall into the 6-month curve. In other words, if you want to effectuate a change, what you're learning now, today, you could read a book, for example, that might take 6 months to really sink in and become part of who you are. So it's almost like a gestation period. In the same way, babies have a 9-month gestation period, ideas kind of have like a 6-month gestation period. And so if you want to do something 6 months from now, reverse engineer it. So you say, all right, what do I need to know to be successful 6 months from now? We'll learn that today. If you want to look better, be in better shape, well, what you do today, 6 months, you can make a radical change in body composition. So if you think of your life instead of, again, these big, scary, all or nothing kind of things, just think about it, all right, where do I want to be 6 months from now? Set realistic goals, reverse engineer them going backward, and if you stack together those 6 months progress periods, boy, it adds up to incredible change.
So let's focus on you for a second, because you've obviously got a lot of stuff going on. At what point did you figure out that books were going to be that natural progression? Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that really couldn't do what you've done. How did you realize that you could not only do one book but could do 2 books? And I'm guessing perhaps maybe the hacker thing is a 3rd book, but I'm only suppositioning here.
That's a good guess. That's a very smart guess. You know what? I think it gets back to the compass instead of the map. I couldn't have routed my career saying I'm going to start 4 companies and then become an author and a venture capitalist and all that. But I had this compass, and the compass was I wanted to sort of maximize my own full potential, and more importantly, I wanted to make the biggest possible impact on the world. And so when you're an entrepreneur, there's certainly the opportunity to create personal wealth. There's nothing wrong with that. But the real wins for me were helping people. Someone who would never, was the first person in their family to go to college, comes into my office and say, hey, I started here 2 years ago, I just bought a house. I mean, that is deeply personally rewarding, the impact that you're making on others. So after 20 or so years of being an entrepreneur, I thought to myself, how can I continue to expand the impact that I can make on others? And becoming an author was one of those ways. I mean, if you kind of naked effort, you put all your ideas on a page and you throw it out in the world and hope for the best. But when I get emails from people in Sri Lanka saying, hey, this made a real difference in my life, that's the juice. And so I just decided, I committed to saying, I'm going to put out the best darn book I can do. I'm going to pour my heart and soul into it. And the second one's a little bit easier because now you know
Sure.
you can do it.
Right, yeah.
But that's the thing is the goal wasn't let's have a bestseller. The goal was let's make the biggest possible impact. And then the monetary outcome was a byproduct.
Sure, but there's some nuance there that I find fascinating about you and a number of other entrepreneurs kind of in that space that I'm not sure you'll have the answer to, but I'm going to unfairly ask you anyway. What do you think it is about guys like yourself, and I know we'll talk about fuel here in a second, but like Seth Godin, and again, to go back to Gary Vaynerchuk, there's that moment in Malcolm Gladwell's book that a lot of people misquote, that idea of the 10,000 hours, right? That if I just put 10,000 hours in, then I'm therefore an expert, but it misses the nuance of after every hour, half of the people quit, right? And so the person who gets to 10,000 hours is actually the person who survived all of this struggle. But you guys are all wired in a way where you look at the world in how you can touch and connect people and not in a way that you can monetize people. Can you speak on, obviously don't speak for them because you're not them, but on yourself on why there's a difference between, let's say, you and what we could label big business?
I think that the most successful people that I've seen don't aim for money. What they do is they aim for something that's probably more noble and more meaningful. And then they think about that money happens as a byproduct of doing great things. So the greedy person who's like, oh, me, I got to get more money, they rarely achieve those goals. On the other hand, someone says, I want to build a business. I want to make a difference in my community. I want to write a book that touches people in a profound way. If they go for greatness, the money often comes as a secondary byproduct. So that's the way I've always looked at it. And I do know Seth. I think he probably looks at it the same way. And the other thing that many successful people share, they have a willingness to imagine the possibilities. In other words, they're not so much focused on protecting what was, they're very excited about what can be. And so they're willing to sort of break free from what currently is in reality and be able to imagine a different possibility, whether it's a product or service or a book or whatever else. And then from there, that's only half the battle. I've backed entrepreneurs that have fallen down and they had great ideas and great technology and they were super smart, but what they lacked is the second big ingredient, which I think is probably, if any, there was one ingredient, this is probably the biggest, is grit. G-R-I-T. It's that, and we have plenty of that here in Detroit.
Yes, you do.
But it's that scrappiness, that hunger, the resiliency, the willingness to always push yourself to the boundaries, the willingness to put yourself out of business and reinvent, the willingness to challenge yourself to grow and learn voraciously, the tenacity to fight through the challenging times. I mean, those are the attributes that I've seen far outweigh intelligence or country club contacts or how slick your user interface is or anything else. Good old-fashioned grit, and I see it in lots of different industries. The grittiest people are the ones that win.
And you kind of touched obviously on Detroit, so let's spend a couple minutes talking about Fuel Detroit. What was the impetus that brought this to be, and kind of what is your view, because you're somebody who obviously doesn't look at what's happening right now, but more kind of like what could be happening. What's your hope for this event?
Well, like many businesses, it was born out of frustration. And being a speaker and an author, I have the privilege to share ideas all over the world. And business conferences are really important. I mean, this is where people come to learn and grow, and leadership development is job number one for most companies. The problem is most conferences just stink. They're horrible. They're in some dimly lit ballroom. It's jank set up. It's low energy. They're boring, content. You need toothpicks to keep your eyes open. And it's just, the whole thing is wrong. Not only that, business people, generally the model is you travel. So let's say you're a business in Detroit. You have to get on an airplane, travel to Phoenix for 2.5 days. So net you're out of the office for 3.5 days. You have massive travel costs. And the 80-20 rule applies. You have 80% bad, lousy content, 20% somewhat okay. So being sick and tired of that and wanting to help people, I said, we're going to blow this model up. So I'm so happy to have launched Fuel Leadership. So our first event in Detroit, Fuel Detroit, is going to be a business event like no one's ever seen. It's going to be a single-day event in our home market. So in other words, we're going to fuel up business leaders in this community in the state of Michigan, and they're home for dinner. They don't have to travel anywhere, and they're only out of the office one day. But more importantly, instead of having a little bit of good content and mostly bad content, this is 100% absolute headline quality, A+ content like people have never seen. We have Magic Johnson, we have Seth Godin, we have Jessica Alba, we have the governor of the state of Michigan talking about business instead of politics. We have Mark Field, CEO of Ford Motor Company. We have Commander Mike Abershoff. So we've assembled this group of unbelievable thought leaders. And they're not there to sell you anything. There's nothing you can buy. They're simply there for one purpose, which is to fuel the audience, to make people smarter, better, give them big ideas and small ideas. And the theory is that people will walk away from that one day and their lives will be transformed. They could take one idea away and it'll make a real difference in their business, in their communities, and in their careers. leaders. So our goal is to help elevate this community through thought leadership in a highly efficient, highly energizing day. And April 13th, that's coming to life.
Awesome. And then talk to me about the next step, right? Because then they become a member of the Fuel leadership community. And what does that kind of community look like?
Yeah, thanks for asking. The other disruptive approach that we took was most time you go to a conference and the closing bell hits and that's the end of it. Ours, the live event concludes and the learning continues. So all attendees get a 12-month membership to something called Fuel Online, which is a proprietary web portal that we've built out that has hundreds of leadership videos. It has professionally written book summaries of all the hot best-selling business books coming out on a regular basis, plus a 10-year archive. We're doing weekly live.
I'm sorry, a 10-year archive?
10-year archive. So that book that you didn't ever get to read back in 2008, come on here, we've got a professionally written summary for it. We've got hundreds of videos, there's weekly live webinars. So the idea is, you get fueled up at this event. But then 2 weeks later, if you're quote unquote out of gas, you can come back and become re-energized. You can learn new tactics and techniques from the world's foremost thought leaders. So Fuel isn't a one-day event, it's an ongoing participation to help fuel our audience, help them achieve more, help them win more.
The thing that I've seen in innovation and support thereof all through this event, that being everything that's housed there for the resources that are ongoing, and then even when you and I were talking on the phone, one of the points you made to me that I thought was really awesome is as these thought leaders, as Magic Johnson and Jessica Alba and Seth Godin are just unloading so much thought leadership on these people all day, you had made the point that so many people will take so many different things in unexpected ways and kind of what the residual effects happen. And I wondered if you could share maybe a little bit more about that perspective. I think it's really great.
But a good way to think about it is that these are these top thought leaders from around the world here for one purpose, to spray the audience with ideas. So think about if an idea was a seed, you're talking about thousands of seeds being sprayed throughout the day. And each of us in our own circumstances and businesses and point in life may take something different. There's one thing that Commander Mike Abershoff said when I saw him speak 5-8 years ago that I can remember today. He talked about an example where instead of in your company doing $10 work, doing $100 an hour work. In other words, you don't mind doing anything, you'll pitch in, but if you can use your best and highest calling and get your team doing that, you elevate your business. That's an idea that he could say 30 times and 30 people wouldn't take anything. I personally got a lot out of it. So the idea at Fuel is that there will be these thousands of ideas. Any one of us may resonate with a different idea, but even if we just take one single seed of an idea back and put it to work in our businesses or our lives, that can make an enormous difference. So it's exciting, it's going to be a high energy, entertaining event, but the real juice of this is all these ideas that will sprout coming out of Fuel.
So on a different note, no pun intended, music, I read something recently that talked about folks that are inclined towards music have an ability to sense things like opportunities for innovation, and I know how much you've connected the art of improvisation to your background with jazz music. And in the event with the segment that you chose to orchestrate with the music of business and actually wrap some jazz into the event, I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how you want music to influence Fuel leadership.
Yeah, well, besides the whole day will be full of music and entertainment, the really high energy. Jazz is an interesting concept. Whether you like jazz or not doesn't matter, but the art form itself is very compelling in that it's basically spontaneous improvisation. You have to innovate in real time. So a jazz musician, when they perform, 99% of the notes that are played are made up as you go. So there's a few markers on the page, but unlike classical music where everything is scripted exactly as is, you have to truly innovate with no music in front of you. And so the culture of a jazz combo is one that facilitates creative risk-taking. If I play it safe in playing a jazz gig, I'll get laughed off the stage. But if I take a risk and play a bad note, we just say we'll play the same bad note twice more and call it art. Good, everything's good. But all kidding aside, what I will help the audience to connect with, whether again they love jazz music or not, is that how jazz musicians think. And when you can take that same thing, because if you think about it, that's what we do every day in business. You don't come in with an operating manual or detailed notes of how to do exactly what. That was maybe what your parents did, but no one does that today. Today we have to come in and use our judgment and use our own creativity. We have to innovate in real time. And jazz is a really fun living metaphor for the exact challenges that we face in the business world.
Absolutely.
So we've been talking a lot about innovation, talking obviously about Fuel Detroit. What other stuff do you have going on? Because you're clearly not a person who just deals with 2 cars at a time. You've got many other things going on. I know, as Brett just alluded to, you play guitar as much as you possibly can, but what other stuff is kind of going on that you can talk about? I'm obviously not asking you to kind of out anything, but what else can we look forward to from you?
Well, so I'm really excited about Fuel. The expanding on what will happen with this. This isn't just a one-time and we're done in Detroit. There will be Fuel Detroit every year. So this will ultimately become part of the fabric of our city.
Will it be the same time, or will you kind of do it thematically, and where, like, will it always be in April, or will it be?
It'll probably be around the same time, maybe not the exact same date, but around the same time. So people will anticipate it and get used to it. But then there's going to be Fuel Cleveland and Fuel Minneapolis and Fuel Phoenix. And so we're looking to expand this concept to 30 to 40 cities, both domestically and internationally, and really become the dominant name in leadership development. You think about TED Talks. And if you want a general talk, if you want to learn about the impact that crickets are making on global climate change, TED is your spot. And I love TED. It's awesome. It's very thought-provoking.
Sure.
But it doesn't necessarily make a difference in your life. And so we want to become known in the same way TED is the gold standard for general ideas. We want Fuel Leadership to be known as the gold standard for practical, business-focused inspiration and tools. And so we're going to continue to build out Fuel around the world, continue to build out the Fuel brand around the world. I'm super excited about it. So that's one thing. I continue to write and speak. As very clever there, I'm starting to work on my next book, which is about hacking. And it's the idea is what can we learn from evil, nefarious hackers that are seeking to take down our government and live in a cloak and dagger underworld. But at the same time, what can we learn from tech hackers who are looking to grow user base and are hackathons at universities? So the metaphor of hacking is really interesting to me because that also symbolizes this new era. You started by asking about 2015. 10, 15, 20 years ago, innovation happened by a giant order from on top, and you make this giant bet, and you try one thing, and you work on it for 90 months, and that doesn't work anymore. So rather than being a traditionalist, I would challenge that today we all need to be hackers. We need to hack at problems, little and big, throughout our lives and our businesses. And so I want people, once they ultimately read the book, to say, hey, I need to hire new millennials. How do I hack that problem? I need to reduce error rates on my assembly line. How do I hack that? So taking the mysterious world of hackers but applying it to mainstream business is what the next book will be about.
Awesome. And you know, one of the things you really haven't touched, or you've sort of danced around the orbit of it, is that essentially the leadership portion, right? Once I get my membership, you're launching a media company, essentially, right?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, we've already licensed tons of content, but we're going to continue to add more content, and we think that content has incredible value, even in different ways. I mean, at some point, some people may attend a live event, or they might just subscribe to Fuel Online. We may branch off in the same way that Franklin Covey has by offering leadership seminars at the company level. We may do that. So we think that leadership development as a category is old school and boring and ineffective and totally broken, and we're setting out to just disrupt the whole industry.
And one last question before we let you go, because you've got a ton of stuff going on. Can you give us a little purview into like what this writing process is? Not what you're writing about, but like what is your process? So you've got an idea for a book, you start doing some research. Do you write? Do you get up is it like the Philip Dick, where you get up every day at 5 o'clock and write for 2 hours and throw it all away? Like, what's that process like?
Well, it's different for different people, of course. What I've done is I've broken it into phases. So right now I'm in a hunter-gatherer phase. So I find that if you try to put structure around it or have a thesis too early, it can really squash down creativity. So right now I'm just grabbing and exploring, and so I'm picking up little things. And once I get a little bit more involved, I'll start doing interviews. But right now I'm just reading, learning, absorbing, watching videos, just gathering everything and throwing it on the table. The next phase will be more of an organized research phase. And on this book on hacking, I'm going to go deep into this dark world. I'm going to meet with ex-cons. I'm going to meet with the head of the FBI, which I've already lined up.
Nice.
So I'm going to meet with the people who wear the masks, the group Anonymous.
Yeah.
So I'm going to really try to penetrate. I'm going to hack my way into the world of hackers, as well as, of course, a lot of experience in startups. So I'll do a pretty extensive research phase, and ultimately out of that, you'll have sort of an outline and a thesis. I can't necessarily tell you what the core secrets are yet of hackers, but I'll be able to once I'm through this process. So in the writing phase, funny enough, it's probably the easiest phase of this whole journey, because the writing will once you have all the research and stories and everything assembled, you can crank that out pretty quick. And I do tend to write on a little bit of a schedule. I like writing in the mornings personally, but and then after that, there's the editing and polishing and marketing phase, and there you go. So this book, any book is a labor of love. This will be out maybe 18 months from today.
Awesome, very exciting. Josh Linkner joining us. I know you're super busy. If people want to get a hold of you, what's your kind of favorite medium du jour that they can talk to you on?
Well, I strongly recommend people check out Fuel Detroit, and that's just the website is fuelleadership.com. That's fuelleadership.com. That's going to be an amazing event. I putting money aside, it's just you're not going to walk out of there with you're just going to be fired up. I mean, it's going to be great. If they want to connect with me personally, just my name, joshlinkner.com, which is linkner.com.
Subscribe to the blog and make sure you get it, joshlinkner.com. Josh, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thanks.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Cool.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Great
That was
stuff.
terrific.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great.
Absolutely.